My name was Ivar, though in time they would call me Ivar the Boneless, a name whispered across blood-soaked shores like a curse. But long before I carried my father's vengeance across kingdoms, I was just a son who watched a legend burn. Ragnar Lothbrok was no ordinary warrior. He was myth and flesh, a king made from iron and rage. And yet, in the end, they tossed him into a pit of serpents like refuse. The king of Northumbria, Gla, carved that fate with smug, Christian certainty. He thought he'd slain a beast, but he'd only birthed a storm. They say my father laughed as the serpents bit deep, that his last breath was not pain, but prophecy, foretelling that his sons would avenge him, not just avenge, unmake England. When the news reached me, I was far to the east, raiding among Slavs and Saxons. A bird flew through our winter camp, a raven with blood on its wings. It landed before my fire and dropped a small, rusted ring. It was my father's. I knew in my marrow that he was dead. That night, I screamed loud enough to break the ice on the fjords. Then I carved his name into my chest with my Sikhs. I summoned my brothers, Hvitserk, Sigurd, Bjorn, all sons of Ragnar, scattered by battle and ambition. We met in the great hall of Kattegat under banners soaked in ale and grief. Each of us bore different scars. Bjorn had seen deserts. Sigurd wore rage like armor. And I was broken in body, but fire coursed through my veins. We swore a blood oath beneath the skulls of our ancestors. We would not mourn Ragnar. We would make kings weep forever touching him. And so we began to gather what would become the largest Viking army the world had ever seen. They would call it the Great Heathen Army, but to me, it was something simpler, a pyre, one I would light, with England as the kindling. We were not a war band, we were a tidal wave. The longships cut through the grey waters like sharpened oars, each one creaking with warriors who painted their teeth red and sang songs of slaughter. It was 865 AD, and the North Sea trembled. I led the front ship, my bones twisted unnaturally from birth. But my mind was sharp as obsidian. Where others saw weakness, I wielded fury. My war cry was not roared, it was planned. Every step of our invasion was etched into my skull like runes. This wasn't a raid, this was retribution. We landed in East Anglia first, a land of cowards and churches. Their king, Edmund, knew what was coming. He offered us horses just to leave. We took them, laughed, and promised he would die later. He would, and his death would become legend. But first, we marched north, to find the butcher of our father, Northumbria, kingless kingdom. But even gods hesitate when they see a fleet blot out the sea. Gla thought he could bribe the storm, thought our grief could be bought with silver. He sent envoys with chests of coin and trembling hands. I spat on the ground before them. This wasn't about wealth, this was about memory. I wanted Gla to feel Ragnar's death in every moment of his own. I wanted him to hear the hiss of serpents, to smell the rot, to dream of pit walls. And I would be the architect of that nightmare. The people of Northumbria fled to their cities like frightened deer. We didn't chase them, we encircled them. We starved their hearts while fires bloomed across their fields. Churches became stables, altars became chopping blocks. I wasn't burning England, I was recreating it, one scream at a time. Finally, the two kings of Northumbria, Gla and Arspot, joined forces to face us. It was too late. Their army, fat from peace and trembling from fear, met us at York. The Saxons thought they had trapped us within the city walls. Fools. We let them in. Once their soldiers flooded into the gates, we closed them behind them. Then we attacked from all sides. Above, below, behind. We butchered them like cattle. Blood ran through the stone streets like rainwater. Gla was captured alive. And that, my brothers, was when Ragnar truly began to rise again. I stood before King Gla, bound and broken, his face blooded but defiant, as if pride could shield him from what was coming. The men had dragged him through the ruins of York, his royal robes shredded, crown nowhere in sight. Now he knelt at the altar of my father's vengeance. We didn't execute him right away. No. That would have been mercy. First, I recited Ragnar's death aloud. Every detail, the serpents, the pit, the jeers, the silence. Then I told Gla that today, he would feel every sting Ragnar endured. And more. He spat at me. I wiped it from my cheek and nodded. The ritual would begin. We carved the blood eagle on Gla. It wasn't just execution. It was theatre. It was justice in a language the gods understood. His ribs were separated from his spine. His lungs pulled outward like wings. We anointed his wounds with salt, so that the last breath he took would feel like fire. His screams didn't shake me, they strengthened me, because with every howl, Ragnar was vindicated. With every breath Gla wasted on pain, the winds of the north carried my father's name. When it was done, we raised a pyre, not for Gla, but for Ragnar. A towering blaze of ash, steel, and memory. I didn't cry. I didn't kneel. I watched. I wanted that fire to live in me forever. And it did. But the revenge wasn't complete. Not yet. The kingdoms of England still stood. The churches still rang their bells. The monks still scrawled their Latin words of judgment, as if Odin didn't walk among them now. As if they hadn't heard the growl of the sea wolves come ashore. So we kept moving. Mercia fell next. Then East Anglia. We took their kings and cut off their tongues. The sons of Ragnar weren't just avenging their father. We were reshaping the entire world. And the world would remember that Northmen do not forgive. Especially when their father is thrown to serpents. After Gla's blood soaked the earth of Northumbria, the brothers stood in silence. The sky above York was grey and unfeeling, like it couldn't care less that the balance of Europe had just shifted. My sword was not yet dull, but the fire in me no longer burned with blind rage. Something colder had replaced it. Purpose. We had avenged our father. But now came the question every son must eventually ask when the revenge is done. What now? Always the thoughtful one, spoke first. We cannot sail back to the old ways. The world is bigger now. We've tasted what kings fear. Why should we stop? Sigurd nodded. Ragnar was a legend. But we can be more. Ivar said nothing. He simply watched the horizon, his eyes squinting like he saw something we didn't. We were no longer just sons. We were heirs to a legacy of blood, ambition, and thunder. So we divided what we had taken. Northumbria became mine. I had no interest in ruling with a crown. I ruled with tides and raids. The coastlines became my court, and every village that heard the beating of our war drums paid tribute in silver and souls. Turned east, he sought lands where the blood hadn't yet dried. Mercia, Wessex, even Francia. It didn't matter. If it had fields, he'd claim them. If it had cities, he'd sack them. If it had warriors, he'd bury them. Sigurd sought something different. He took to the rivers, carving his name into the lands of the Franks. He believed we could be more than raiders, settlers, kings. He was half right. He died before he saw it through. And Ivar chose madness. He waged war not for land, but for fear. Wherever he went, crops withered, priests fled. Children were told bedtime stories about his chariot wheels crushing bones beneath the weight of pagan wrath. Some say he was cursed. Others say he was blessed by the gods. I just say he never let go of Ragnar's death. But even as we scattered across kingdoms, seas, and lifetimes, one truth bound us together. We were made by Ragnar's death. His bloodline became a map for conquest. His scream in the snake pit, that became our battle cry. And though our paths diverged, our destiny remained the same. We would not just haunt Europe. We would shape it. I had heard tales of Paris since I was a boy sitting at Ragnar's feet. He spoke of its high walls, rich churches, and foolish kings with too much silver and not enough spine. One day, Bjorn, he said, you will make the Seine run red. And I did. We sailed from the icy ports of Kattegat in the spring, our ships hungry, our men hungrier. The sea carried our war songs across the wind like a curse. No Christian city had seen a storm what we carried in our sails. The walls of Paris were thick, arrogant, unlined with trembling archers. But I did not come to test their strength. I came to remind them that even stone can bleed. We camped on the banks of the Seine, surrounding them like wolves around a trapped boar. They sent messengers, offerings, gold, wine, words. I spat in their wine and burned their messages. Then I struck. By land, my warriors launched ladders and fire. The skies above Paris turned black with smoke and blacker with the screams of burning men. By river, my longships blocked trade and cut off every route of escape. Their water turned from salvation to prison. They cried to their God. I answered with flaming arrows. Every tower became a funeral pyre. Every bell became a signal of doom. We breached the outer gates. Then the inner. Then the heart. I walked through cathedrals littered with gold crosses, scoffing. Their God did not save them. The French king, Charles the Bald, offered us £7,000 of silver. He begged me to leave. I agreed, but only after I carved the names of my brothers into the altar of their grandest church. I wanted the Parisians to remember that we were not savages. We were surgeons. We did not raid. We rewrote empires. When we returned to our ships, the city behind us was half ash, half myth. The monks would write that a plague had come. They were right, but the plague had names: Bjorn, Ivar, Sigurd, and one name above all, Ragnar. His bones may have rotted beneath a pit of snakes, but his vengeance was alive in every torch I raised, every gold chalice I shattered, every priest I silenced. Paris burned because a father had died. And Europe finally began to fear his sons. Victory came, again and again, but with every battle, I felt something grow colder inside me. Not fear, never fear. It was the silence that came after. After Paris fell, after we sacked cities along the Seine and raided deep into Spain, even into the edge of the Mediterranean, I stood on ships built with the bones of my enemies and asked myself why I still felt empty. They sang songs of me in the halls of Kattegat. They called me Bjorn the Great, Bjorn the Hammer of Christendom, Bjorn Ironside. But the only name that mattered to me was whispered in quiet moments by the old and shouted by children at play. Ragnar. I once believed Valhalla would be enough, that if I died in battle, I would drink with my father again beneath Odin's watchful eye. But the truth, the one no school dares to sing, is that Valhalla never comes for men like me. Not because we aren't brave, but because we never stop fighting. The gods demand death, but I gave them dominion. I ruled from Dublin to Kiev. I held the reins of fleets that could blacken the sea. I wore kings like cloaks and crushed their legacies beneath my boots. But none of it brought Ragnar back. I returned to the pit once, years later. The snakes were gone, bones scattered, weathered, broken. Time had devoured what the King of England could not. I fell to my knees. I didn't cry. Ironsides don't weep. But my sword, my father's sword, I laid it across the stones and left it there. It no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the man who began it all. You ask me now why I fought, why I never rested, why I turned Christian cities into graveyards and crowned myself not with gold, but with terror. It wasn't to conquer. It was to remind the world that Ragnar Lothbrok did not die quietly. They murdered him in a pit, yes, but they resurrected him in fire. Every son of Ragnar carried a piece of him, and I carried the fire. I wielded it until the world glowed red and begged for mercy, until kings sent their children to learn our tongue, until priests begged not for salvation, but for mercy from Ragnar's sons. Now I grow old, my hair greys. My hands tremble not with fear, but with memory. They will bury me with axes and shields, with coins upon my eyes and songs in my name. But when they do, I want this said first: he did not fight for gold. He did not fight for land. He fought because they killed his father. And for that, the world will never forget my name, Bjorn, son of Ragnar, Ironside, breaker of kings, revenge given form. If this story sent chills down your spine or made you rethink what revenge truly means, don't forget to subscribe and share. The more we expose the raw truth behind history's most brutal betrayals, the more powerful our stories become. Drop a comment. Who do you think was the most fearsome Viking of all time?